Good morning from Louisville, Kentucky, an ACPA. I wish I could be with y'all this morning to hear everybody's research proposal defense, but I'm in the midst of getting ready for my presentation this afternoon. But thanks in advance for providing feedback on this, and I'm really excited to hear the thoughts that you have. So as most of you know, I'm really passionate about the experience of outdoor program trip leaders, and so I'm going to be proposing a phenomenological study of outdoor program student trip leaders. So to begin with, the literature is comprised of a few different areas. First off, there's a pretty wide body of literature related to outdoor programs generally. Within that, O'Connell and Brunig found an increased sense of community in outdoor program participants. And then there was this really large meta-analysis that found that leadership and self-concept were important themes. They collected data from about 40 research studies related to outdoor programs and found that the effect sizes were large and that these themes emerged from the meta-analysis. So then next, there was increased leadership and interpersonal skills found by Sibthorpe and Paisley and Gookin. They looked at outcomes of a National Outdoor Leadership School series of courses and found these results related to the outcomes. So specifically, the Knowles courses were directed out at creating outcomes for leadership, and they found that that was in fact the case with a number of different groups over a given season at a Knowles base. So this is all related to outdoor programs participation. Unfortunately, the body of literature related to leadership isn't as extensive, but there are definitely studies that have been done. So next, let's look at a couple of those. First off, Probst and Kessler found increased self-efficacy among outdoor leaders. So the leaders that took out participants through a number of courses had increased self-efficacy about themselves and their abilities, specifically related to outdoor leadership. And then Hayashi at Indiana University did an exciting study for her dissertation on outdoor leaders and found that they actually had increased emotional intelligence as a result of their leadership experiences. So then moving on to the third body of literature that I'll be incorporating is that of student leadership. Now, student leadership is very wide, very broad. There's a number of different theories, countless number of studies, but I'm focusing in primarily on those that will assist me in addressing my interest in outdoor program student trip leaders. So among those, I found a study that investigated recreational sports student leaders, and what these authors found was that rec sports student leaders were in fact, they had themes that were consistent with student leadership generally. So they used a number of different models of leadership, including the social change model and other socially relational leadership models. But they found that these rec sports leaders showed those themes through a qualitative study they did. Unfortunately, because of the campus that they're at, outdoor programs were not a part of that study. That's located in a different department at this campus. So then next, I found an article that studied leadership programs and what the outcomes were broadly. It didn't address outdoor programs specifically, but it did find that that student leadership can be taught to students. This is very important because they looked and found that positional leadership wasn't required for leadership outcomes to be present. So in my work, I'm hoping that that can apply because not everyone who's a trip leader might be a head trip leader. They might be assistants or shadows in some kind of other capacities. So I think that's an important study to point out that position of leadership isn't necessarily important to get leadership outcomes. And then I found a study that did a study of program outcomes and how they influence leadership capacity. So Dugan et al. Looked at 16 different program types across a number of campuses to see what programs were effective in creating leadership capacities related to the social change model of leadership specifically. Interestingly enough, he found that outdoor programs leadership was actually negatively correlated with leadership capacity. So this study definitely is informing my question about if outdoor program trip leadership is a type of student leadership. So with these three areas in mind, that brings me to my research questions. And the first question is, how do outdoor program student trip leaders frame their experiences? All of the student leadership studies that have been done bring with them a frame of quantitative research that is related to self-efficacy, so what leaders are saying about themselves, but that's largely grounded in traditional student leadership programming. So I'm going to find out what frame do outdoor program student trip leaders use for their experiences. And with that, I have a couple of sub-questions. The first being, how do they communicate their experiences to others? So when they talk about outdoor program trip leadership, do they talk about it in the frame of student leadership, or are they more related to stewardship of the environment or recreation? How do they communicate those experiences? And then how do they perceive the role of trip leadership as a component of their overall college experience? I think that definitely we've talked about a lot of different kinds of trip leaders or student leaders in class, including student government, student organizations, and they all definitely have a certain place in the campus environment. And I'm curious, do student trip leaders find themselves in a place of student leadership in the college environment, or do they just simply associate with outdoor recreation as part of their college experience? And then I want to know, to what extent do they value and place meaning on their trip leadership experiences? So are these important experiences of magnitude for them to be taking out groups into the wilderness and backcountry, or are they simply fun experiences that they forget about a few days later? So I want to find out what their experiences mean to them. So for my theoretical framework, I'm obviously doing not obvious, but I will be doing a qualitative study. So some of the theoretical framework will come after my data gathering. But I plan on using the social change model of leadership development as my theoretical lens. And that's how I'm going to define leadership. So some of you may be familiar with this model, but essentially it encompasses three areas of leadership that lead to change. So positive social change is the outcome of the social change model. And those three areas are group values, society and community values, and individual values. So within the research on the social change model, there have been existing qualitative studies. They haven't used the social change model as a theoretical framework specifically, but they have investigated student leaders and addressed the social change model as one type of socially responsible leadership. And then in the study that I mentioned previously, Dugan actually called for more qualitative inquiry into leadership experiences, and specifically with the social change model. So all of this is informing me to my methodology, which is I'm going to study the phenomenology of student trip leaders to uncover their lived experience. And to do this, I'll be conducting interviews with a convenient sample of 3 student outdoor program trip leaders at the University of Georgia. And it'll be very important for me to acknowledge my positionality because I am a fellow outdoor trip leader to them, and also I will be their supervisor. I do function in that role. So I think that might help me uncover things that they might not share with others who they don't have those associations with. But definitely through my methodology and my interview protocol, I'll be considering what my bias is and what my positionality is that brings me to this work. So here are my references. So I'll leave those up for a few seconds to give you a chance to read some of the titles that speak towards the studies that I've addressed. But with all this, I really want to say I want to give a deep gratitude of thanks to all of you. Finding my question has been a struggle. There isn't a lot of charted territory related to these areas, and I've definitely struggled finding a theoretical framework and finding any examples I could work off. And sorry if my frustrations have shown, but I want you to know that I appreciate all of the feedback you have, and I look forward to seeing you back in Athens. So thanks a lot, and have a great day.